Yeah. And, they told me, they said, Masvidal said he's going to come up on site. And I said, well, where's Masvidal sitting? He said, well, he's 6 or 7 rows away from Masvidal. I said, well, if the guy has a ticket, let him sit in his seat. And
So you're asking why Dana White is mad at Islam Makhachev. When asked, he played it cool, saying, I have no idea. I didn't know I was. We're definitely not mad at him. But that's the public face, because multiple sources are saying that behind closed doors, it's a completely different story. Dana is reportedly furious. And it's not just that his champion might be leaving, it's about who he supposedly signed a new deal with. Let's get into what really happened, because the whole thing started to fall apart on one single night. After UFC 302, the scene inside Madison Square Garden felt completely normal. Like the well-oiled machine of the UFC had just finished another massively successful event. You could feel the energy from the sold-out crowd and see the disciplined efficiency of a promotion that had just put on another show for the history books. And when Dana White walked up to the podium, he had that swagger of a guy who is used to shattering records and exceeding all expectations. The press room was buzzing, cameras were flashing everywhere, and before a single journalist could even get a question out, Dana laid down the law with his signature authority, saying, all right, the attendance tonight was 26,654, sold out. Gate was 13, and right after that, he put it all into historical perspective to remind everyone in that room just who runs the most famous arena in the world. He pointed out that it was the 3rd highest gate ever at MSG, and that the UFC now holds spots 1 through 5, 7, 9, and 10 for all-time gates at the venue, adding that within a couple of years, they'd own the entire top 10. It was the kind of powerful opening that was supposed to kick off a standard, predictable press conference night, filled with talk of huge crowds, record-breaking numbers, and a dominant champion in the main event. On the surface, the whole evening looked stable, under control, practically routine. But here's the thing, while Dana was still talking, a quiet little notification popped up in the UFC's internal admin system, the one they use for tracking everything from fighter schedules and contractual duties to commercial paperwork. A red flag was automatically triggered right next to Islam Makhachev's name. There was no explanation, no specific details, just a tag that read, External Commercial Contract, not UFC authorized. Now, a message like that is incredibly rare, and when it does show up, it's meant for one man and one man only, Dana White. The security team, however, didn't hand it to him right away. They held back. They are trained to wait until the press conference is over, unless the notification is about a direct legal threat. This one was in a gray area. It was clearly serious enough to be flagged, but it was so vague that interrupting the president in the middle of a presser could create a storm of unnecessary chaos. So that alert just sat in a supervisor's pocket while Dana kept on talking, totally oblivious to the storm brewing behind the scenes. The reporters, of course, started with questions about the main event, focusing on Islam Makhachev's performance. The champion had just put on a suffocating, picture-perfect display of his skills, the kind of win that silences all doubters even if it doesn't create a lot of fireworks. Dana was open about the lack of pure excitement, but the praise he gave was absolutely clear, and looking back now, it was a crucial piece of the story that was developing backstage. He admitted, not the most exciting title fight you'll ever see, but almost in the same breath, he followed it up with a much heavier statement, saying, but let me tell you what, complete dominance, this guy's headed toward GOAT talk. In the world of the UFC, that's not just a casual compliment. The term GOAT talk is a signal that a fighter's power and influence are growing beyond what a typical champion holds. It's a sign that the UFC needs to be extremely careful, strategic, and on high alert. And get this, those exact words were coming out of Dana's mouth at the very moment the UFC's operations staff were looking at that system flag right next to Islam's name. They understood precisely what GOAT talk meant for the stability of a contract and just how catastrophic an unapproved outside deal could be. For now, though, the press conference went on as usual. Questions came up about who Islam would fight next, and Dana outlined what he saw as the most exciting options. There were several huge names calling out Islam, and every single one of them represented a massive payday. He mentioned Kamaru Usman, Shavkat, and Ilia Topuria were all demanding a shot, which gave the promotion a ton of amazing choices to work with. Then came a moment that, in hindsight, feels like pure foreshadowing. A reporter asked if Dana had a chance to speak with Islam since the victory. Dana's response was quick and casual, but it lined up perfectly with the crisis that was quietly unfolding. Has he been through here yet, Islam? Dana didn't mean anything by it, since fighters often skip the press room, but for the UFC operations team listening from the hallway, their stomachs dropped. Because if Islam really had signed some kind of external commercial deal, he absolutely should have talked to Dana or the internal team first. Suddenly, his absence felt like it had a whole new, much darker meaning. Dana kept on answering questions, and when asked about the highly anticipated White House card, he made it clear that Islam was definitely in the running to be a potential headliner. So could Islam end up at the White House? It's definitely a possibility, he told the room. While the public heard that as high praise, inside the UFC, it was about to become the core of the problem. A fighter who is about to headline the most ambitious event in the company's history simply cannot be tied to any outside commercial deals without the UFC's explicit permission. But Dana still had no idea. He went on to answer questions about Valentina Shevchenko, Jorge Masvidal, and a bunch of other fighters, and he even tackled that chaotic moment with Bo Nickel with his typical brutal honesty. He then talked about Islam's incredible winning streak, which tied Anderson Silva's record. Islam Makhachev ties his record for 16 consecutive wins. He shared the story of Khabib's emotional reaction, saying, "Khabib came up to me, freaking out and screaming, wrapped him over the head with both the belts." All of these little details were crucial, because Islam was becoming more valuable by the second, not just as a champion, but as a core asset for the UFC's entire promotional future. All the while, that internal alert was still sitting there, unopened. As the presser continued, Dana commented on the messy situation involving Dillon Danis, explaining, "They told me Masvidal said he's going to come up on site. If the guy has a ticket, let him sit in his seat." And then with total finality he announced, "You will never see Dillon Danis at a UFC fight ever again." These moments show exactly how Dana reacts when he feels blindsided or disrespected, and the staff in the hallway holding that alert knew exactly how he was going to react to this kind of surprise. He kept going, talking about rankings, pound-for-pound debates, and the UFC's plans for global growth, confidently restating that Jon Jones is still the greatest of all time. Yes, Jon Jones is still the GOAT, whether you like it or not. He talked about the insane crowd energy in France, his target locations, and the depth of the roster, showing total command over the promotion's future. It was only after the very last question that Dana finally stepped away from the lights and went backstage, where that operations supervisor at last walked up to him with a printed sheet containing the alert. Dana took it, his eyes went to the headline, and he just froze. It said, "Unauthorized external contract registered, Makhachev, Islam." The fallout was instant and potentially catastrophic. In the UFC's universe, a champion is not allowed to have independent commercial deals that haven't been reviewed, approved, and integrated into the organization's strict regulatory system. And here was Islam, the unstoppable, dominant champion on a GOAT trajectory, who apparently hadn't told a soul. No discussion, no request for approval, no disclosure, absolutely nothing. Dana just stared at that single line of text, reading it over and over as pure anger started to boil just under the surface. Everyone around him knew that look. It was the same face he made right before he delivered his famous ultimatum during the Affliction incident. But this time, the stakes were a million times higher. Islam Makhachev wasn't just another fighter, he was the linchpin for the UFC's biggest plans for the future. And now, all of those plans were at risk. Dana took a slow breath, lowered the piece of paper and asked the only question that truly mattered. What contract? Nobody had an answer. The explosion was coming. The very second Dana White uttered the words, "What contract?" the whole vibe backstage completely changed. The UFC's backstage area normally runs like a military command center hidden inside a sports arena, with assistants murmuring into headsets, security guards managing movement, and execs weaving through a labyrinth of restricted doorways. But everything came to a dead stop the moment Dana held up that piece of paper. The air got thick around him, and even the people who had no idea what was going on could feel the tension sizzle. Dana wasn't yelling, he wasn't pacing, he wasn't even cursing yet. He was just standing there terrifyingly still, looking at the alert as if reading it one more time might somehow change what it said. It did. The supervisor who gave him the message, a guy who had survived 6 different company scandals and had worked under Dana for almost a decade, cleared his throat and said the one thing no one on staff ever wants to say, "We might have a situation." Dana's eyes narrowed. His voice became a low whisper, the kind he uses right before he blows the roof off the place. "Who flagged it?" The supervisor gestured down the hall towards the main operations hub, and without saying another word, Dana started walking, and walking. People jumped out of his way to avoid getting steamrolled. His staff trailed behind, scrambling to keep pace but smart enough not to ask any questions. Inside the operations office, a group of analysts were hunched over their monitors, which were covered in fighter profiles, contract logs, and compliance reports. When Dana stormed in, they all jumped to attention. "Pull up Makhachev," he commanded. In a flash, Islam's entire file was on the main screen. All his recent activity was there and looked totally normal: fight agreements, medical clearances, weigh-in confirmations, everything was in order. But then, down at the bottom, glowing in yellow, was the anomaly again. External commercial contract, pending registration, not UFC authorized. Dana leaned in close. "Click it." The analyst just shook his head. "We can't. There's no file attached, just the trigger flag." That only made him angrier. "So you're telling me our system flags an external contract for a world champion on the biggest night of the year, and you don't know what the hell it is?" The analyst stammered. "It means the contract exists, but the source hasn't sent the details to our system yet. It usually happens when a partner organization files paperwork before they've notified us." "Partner organization?" Dana snapped back. "Who the hell is partnering with our champion without going through us?" Complete silence. The kind of silence that makes your stomach churn. Islam Makhachev ties his record for 16 consecutive wins. One of the ops directors carefully stepped forward. "Technically, it could be anything. A branding deal, a regional sponsorship, an outside promotion, a media partnership." Dana cut him off right there. "He doesn't sign a single thing without it coming through us first. Nothing. He knows the rules. His team knows the rules. Are you telling me Islam signed some deal tonight during his own title defense?" The room was silent. They didn't have to answer. Dana turned away, breathing heavily, trying to control the surge of adrenaline and rage. His thoughts immediately raced back to the press conference, replaying every quote, every question, every single time he had put Islam into the GOAT conversation. He had just publicly elevated Islam's value, boosted his trajectory, and talked about him headlining the biggest card in company history at the White House. And the whole time, Islam hadn't come backstage. He hadn't checked in. He hadn't even been seen in the press area. He had just vanished after the fight, supposedly to celebrate. But now, his disappearance looked calculated. The pieces were starting to form a picture that Dana really did not want to see. He turned back to the analysts. "When did the alert get time-stamped?" One of them scrolled through the log. "It came in during the press conference, right around the time you mentioned Islam in connection with the White House show." That timing was definitely not a coincidence. Dana's gaze sharpened. "And nobody has contacted him." The room shared a few nervous glances. "He left the arena," the supervisor said quietly, "right after his medicals. Didn't talk to the media, didn't go to the VIP area, didn't check in with anyone. He just got into a private car with his team and left." Dana's face hardened. A champion leaving on the biggest night of his life without even acknowledging the organization was strange enough, but leaving just minutes before a secret contract alert hits, that was something else entirely. He exhaled sharply through his nose, trying to keep himself from exploding. "Call Hunter," he ordered. "Call PR, and get me legal on the line. Now." People scattered immediately. While the calls were being made, Dana's mind replayed the whole night in fragments. The praise, the talk of Islam's dominance, his pound-for-pound rank, the story about Khabib with the belts, the high expectations for his future. The buzz around legacy fights, and especially the momentum for that unprecedented White House event. All of it had pushed Islam's leverage to a level that fighters rarely reach until the very end of their careers, not in the middle of a title reign. And a fighter with that kind of leverage becomes a prime target for outside groups trying to cash in on his value. But Islam wasn't known for being reckless or impulsive. He wasn't the type to just sign something behind the UFC's back. So if he actually did sign something, it had to be huge. Bigger than anything the UFC could have anticipated. Big enough for his team to think they could get away with hiding it, at least for a little while. That thought lit a fire of pure fury inside him. Hunter Campbell showed up in less than 2 minutes, still in his post-event jacket, and holding files from another issue he'd been handling. "What's going on?" he asked. Dana just handed him the paper. Hunter read it once, and then a second time, much more slowly. Dana nodded. "Exactly." Hunter moved closer to the monitor. "Do we know what kind of external contract it is?" "Media. Endorsement. Broadcast?" "No details," the analyst repeated. just that some entity filed a registration for a signed agreement with Islam, and our system flagged it because he's an active champion. Hunter stroked his chin. Whoever filed it might not know that our system automatically cross-checks fighters with champion status restrictions. Dana slammed his hand down on the desk. Or they knew, and they just didn't care. Hunter didn't argue. The two of them had been through 1,000 crises together, from John Jones's suspensions to Conor McGregor's antics. But this situation had a unique danger. Champions have ironclad contract. An unauthorized deal, depending on what it was, could cancel fights, derail entire events, or completely block Islam from headlining that White House card. Dana started pacing. Islam is a centerpiece of our plans for the next 2 years. We're setting up Spain, we're locking down the White House, we're finalizing the Paramount deal. We can't have a champion signing mystery deals behind our backs. No, absolutely not. Then the worst possible thought hit him. Hunter asked, or, could it be another promotion? Dana froze. The entire room went silent. Hunter kept going, his voice steady but serious. We've seen other organizations get really aggressive when a fighter's value shoots up. Even offers that don't pan out can trigger these registration flags if they file the paperwork ahead of time, thinking they're going to land the deal. You're saying they could leak a contract filing before Islam even gets out of the arena? Dana asked slowly. Hunter nodded. To create pressure, to create leverage, or to publicly claim him before he can deny it. That idea exploded in Dana's mind. A pre-filed contract, a public relations trap, someone trying to make it look like Islam had already signed with them, even if he had. A move designed to create instant headlines and chaos. Dana's voice dropped to a dangerously low level. Find out who filed it. The operations team immediately got to work, digging through signature metadata, registry sources, anything that could trace the origin. As they were digging, an assistant ran into the room with a phone. Dana, you need to see this. Dana grabbed the phone. On the screen was a social media post that was already starting to spread through the MMA community. It wasn't viral yet, but it was only minutes away. The post alleged that Islam Makhachev had just entered into a historic partnership with a major organization outside of the UFC. There were no details, and no confirmation, but it was more than enough to start a firestorm of speculation, and make the entire situation 100 times worse. Hunter looked over his shoulder. Who posted it? Dana zoomed in. It was a journalist known for leaking deals early, sometimes getting it right, sometimes getting it disastrously wrong. The post read, Breaking. Islam Makhachev has reportedly signed a new contract outside the UFC. Details. Dana's face turned to stone. The problem had just gone from an internal issue to a public inferno, and Islam was completely unreachable. Hunter looked at him. We need to get out in front of this, right now. Dana just shook his head. Not until we know what the hell is really going on. He turned to the room, his voice rising, cutting through the noise like a knife. Find Islam, find his team, find out who filed this contract. I don't care what time it is or where they are. Call every manager, every contact we have. I want answers before this whole thing blows up. He paused, breathing heavily, his anger just barely under control. And when we get the truth, Dana growled, someone's getting lit up. Everyone scattered. Phones started ringing, keyboards started clacking, and staff were sprinting down the hall. The UFC machine was now in full-blown emergency mode, and at the very center of it all was the one man who needed answers the most, Dana White, just standing there waiting, seething, knowing that the very next phone call could completely rewrite the future of his most dominant champion. The explosion hadn't come yet, but it was on its way. The deeper the UFC's team dug into this mystery folder, the more the problem escalated from a simple, confusing alert into a total crisis. Phones were ringing off the hook, compliance officers were running between different departments, and every couple of minutes, someone would rush in with another tiny piece of information. None of it solved the mystery, but every new detail just added more weight to a situation that should never have happened. Hunter Campbell paced by the operations table as analysts sifted through metadata. Meanwhile, Dana was planted in front of the main monitor, just staring at Islam's profile as if the screen itself were hiding the answers from him. The things he had said at the press conference just hours earlier were echoing in his mind, mocking the control he thought he had. When he said Islam was headed for GOAT talk, that wasn't just hype, it was a strategic move. That kind of talk raises a fighter's commercial value, which is precisely why the UFC locks its champions into suffocatingly exclusive contracts. A champion is not allowed to negotiate on their own with any organization that could use their image or schedule. And yet, here they were, with a mysterious contract filed somewhere. As the team was checking different regional registries, one of the analysts suddenly froze. "Dana, we've got something." Dana was at the monitor in a second. The analyst pointed to a line of code that identified the region where the filing came from. It had pinged through a European commercial registry, one that's often used by foreign promotions. Hunter leaned in. "Which one?" The analyst paused. He couldn't confirm the exact company yet, but the registry was used by several organizations that had tried to sign Islam in the past. Dana stared him down. "Say it." The analyst took a deep breath. "It could be one of the Middle Eastern mega-event groups." The room went completely silent, because that was a whole different level of problem. We're not talking about a normal sponsorship deal here. The big event organizers in the Middle East are known for bankrolling combat sports superfights with budgets that the UFC doesn't even try to compete with. These aren't just small brands. These are groups with enough financial power to make life-altering offers, the kind of offers that could tempt even a world champion to bend or break UFC rules. Dana clenched his jaw. "They wouldn't dare file something without talking to us first." Hunter replied calmly, but his tone darkened the entire room. "If Islam's team was talking to them behind our backs, and if they thought their deal was somehow protected from UFC interference, they might." It felt like a gut punch to Dana. He replayed another moment from the press conference in his head, the one that now felt so much more significant. Has he been through here yet, Islam? No. At the time it meant nothing, but now his absence looked intentional, coordinated, and worst of all, perfectly timed. Hunter turned to the room. "We need to speak with his manager." An assistant immediately called out, "We've already tried. His phone is off. His team members say he left with Islam right after the fight, and isn't responding." Dana's temper finally snapped. "What do you mean he hasn't responded? He manages the reigning world champion. His phone is not going to be off tonight." Nobody said a word. Then, another analyst waved them over. "Sir, we traced the filing's timestamp through the foreign server. It lines up exactly with the moment that reporter tweeted the story." He pointed to the post, which was still on a side monitor. This wasn't just a lucky guess by a reporter. This was a coordinated move. It was leverage. It was pressure. It was ammunition fired before the UFC even knew what was happening. This wasn't a leak. It was a strategy. At that very moment, a staffer ran in holding a tablet. "Dana, the media is demanding a statement. The story is spreading." Dana turned slowly, his voice low and sharp. "We're not saying a damn thing. But the speculation, I don't care about speculation." Dana cut him off. "We don't talk until we have the truth. If this is real, we deal with it internally. If it's not, we're not going to give oxygen to some BS stunt." Hunter nodded. "Agreed. No comment until we know who filed it." They pushed forward with the investigation, and every new discovery just tightened the tension. As the minutes ticked by, the stakes got higher and higher. The White House event, global expansion plans, ESPN negotiations, Paramount, the UFC's entire chokehold on the sport depends on controlling its champions. That's when another realization hit Dana like a lightning bolt. A 16-fight win streak, tying Anderson Silva's record. That level of dominance turns a fighter into a global asset, valuable not just to the UFC, but to everyone. Boxing promoters, international governments, looking for sports showcases, any of them could be dangling a massive deal. And if Islam even considered one of those offers, it would explain everything. More people flooded the room. Legal, compliance, PR. The space turned into a chaotic hub of frantic activity. Dana just stood in the middle of it all, completely still, absorbing every detail, connecting the dots, and waiting for the next piece of information to drop. Another staffer approached Hunter. "Sir, we found the originating office." The contract was filed through a European intermediary that's known for representing international event venues. Dana's eyes were burning with the fury of a man who had just been completely blindsided on the biggest night of the year. "Find out exactly what's in that folder," he growled, "and get his team on the phone. Because after everything I said tonight, after everything this organization has built, if Islam signs something without telling us," he paused, shaking with rage, "I'm going to tear this entire situation apart." Phones kept ringing. Teams were mobilized, and the chaos just kept spreading. And right in the middle of it all was Dana White, president of the UFC, preparing for a confrontation that could completely change Islam Makhachev's future, redefine what it means to be a champion, and decide whether the most dominant fighter in the sport had just risked everything the UFC had built around him. The storm was officially here. Dana, famous for his no-nonsense style, wasn't holding back, and now we all have to wait and see how this story plays out over the next few months. Is there any chance for reconciliation, or is this really the end of the road? Thanks for listening, and be sure to check out our other videos on the screen.